Hey, that Logan Hensley, he's got it here.
It's odd that everybody else couldn't see it and he could.
Well, I can see.
It never showed up on mine either.
I can see that like 3 people are watching now.
I'm still showing 32.
I'm on the same space, I thought. Yeah, I can. Don't know.
I'm showing 38 people watching now. I mean, they're watching.
I can see that. I can see that on my phone.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
But I can't see that, and I can see us on YouTube on my computer, but I can't see us on YouTube on my phone. So.
Hey guys, if there's anybody out there that's not Logan Hensley that is able to see this, if you could jump on, leave a comment for us so we know that it's actually getting out to some other folks, that'd be really helpful for us on this end.
Did you see Logan's comment there, Danny?
Need to go to the channel itself, huh? Ah, okay.
Can you post the link in the comments,
I did.
Danny?
I just did. Well, I did, and then I just sent it to Todd too.
Okay.
Looks like I got some folks that are added in now.
I mean, I can see where Logan said try this link, but there's no link there.
Then do you see where I posted the link right afterwards?
No.
All right, Todd said he just posted it.
It's not showing up in the comments though. There must be some kind of setting that blocks
Links.
links. Can Todd send out the link, the right link, through that same email?
I can. I'll do. Give me just a second here.
And I can tell everybody to on top. Well, just yeah. Okay, somebody's posting it already.
Somebody posted it. Oh,
They didn't post a link. Somebody just said another link has been sent out.
okay. I got the dog in the picture, Kathy.
Zoe's messing with me.
Oh. Oh, the way I did the email, it's not letting me do it. Here we go.
People are hanging in.
Yeah.
On their edge of the seats to get this information. Breaking news.
Getting quite a few more in here. That's somebody's dog who's drinking.
I think
Yeah.
that's Josh's dog.
I may have to find a new location.
They're just going to mess with you the whole time, aren't they? Oh. Okay. We've got 11 people on here now. I just sent out a new email, so there'll be some more joining. We'll give everybody. Oh, we're only 25 minutes in, so we'll wait another minute or so for people to join. Apologize for the technical difficulties. Evidently, the link that we provided was not the link that ended up showing up that this showed up in. So. All right, we got it. Looks like people are joining now. Mike, you are indeed here now. We're going to just another 30 seconds here, and then we'll go ahead and get started again. I mean, we've already prayed over everybody. Nobody heard it, but we did. Josh gave an eloquent introduction to everything, but he will have to try again. I'm sure it won't be as good the second time as it was the first.
Probably shorter.
All right. So I'll say to you, welcome to this town hall meeting. We're glad that you stuck with us long enough to be able to be a part of this, and we hope that you will definitely participate with us tonight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to offer a prayer, and then I'm going to turn it over to Josh Carpenter, who is the chair of the Restructure Task Force, and Josh is going to he's going to offer basically an introduction to things and then help moderate questions. And if you want to, have questions, as long as you include them there in the comments on YouTube, we're able to see those and we'll respond to them. We'll respond as many as we can tonight. And then what we can't respond to, we will here in this fashion, we will do so through through text here. And so we'll definitely get to everybody's question as best we can. So at this time, I'm gonna pray. So I just ask you to pray with me, if you would. Almighty God, we are grateful for the opportunity to share in these moments together. We thank you for the people that we get to share this with. We thank you for General Baptist for their impact on the world. And we are especially thankful tonight for the opportunity to share in a common mission for a common purpose. Lord, I pray that you would bless those that have chosen to come and be a part of this tonight, that you would give them an opportunity to draw nearer to one another and to have a clarity around who we are together for your kingdom's purpose. So, Lord, we pray you would bless this meeting tonight in the name of Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
And that was a very different prayer from the first time I prayed. So there you go. So, Josh, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thanks, Danny. Just quickly, let me again welcome everyone, as Danny did. And let me encourage you, if you have some questions in mind, go ahead and begin to type those questions in the comments. And we can get those lined up and we'll begin to respond to them as soon as I'm done here. Our purpose tonight is not to offer any new information and really not to give much of an overview of the proposals that have been made. Those documents that outline all of that have been made available to you for some time now. And so we really just want to respond to what questions you might have and offer any clarifications that we might be able to. But quickly, let me just say, this process really started 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, when the conversation first began about can we do things better? Can we have a structure, a leadership process that might be more effective than what we currently have? And so the Executive Council decided to take action based upon that question and form the Restructure Task Force. And that task force began to first study our current structure and to begin to ask questions of it based upon the committee's experience and other leaders in our denomination. And then based upon the questions and concerns that we had, we had listening sessions and took in questions and concerns that the whole General Baptist family had, and we offered those listening sessions to different regions. Based upon all that information, we come together and then began to talk about what a different structure might look like that could serve us better and help us to serve better as well. Out of those discussions, we've come up with a new proposal that we have offered. Hopefully you've taken some time and looked at the website or the page that's on the General Baptist Ministries website that outlines the proposed restructuring, and also looked at the documents that Danny sent out via the email, I believe, last week. So what we're going to do tonight is take some overall questions to start with about the proposal overall, any overarching questions you might have. And then we're going to take some specific questions, first dealing with the Constitution of the Board of Overseers, and then the Constitution of the General Association. So with that, we'll open it up to any questions anyone might have. So someone's going to have to be first tonight. All right, here we have a question. What is the difference in purpose function between the Board of Overseers and the old general board of the denomination or the executive council or the council associations? That's a great question, Glenn. I appreciate you putting that out there. Anybody want to volunteer to tackle that one first?
I mean, I can provide some context. The difference between, whenever we had a general board, or we had a variety of different boards where they were basically functioning as oversight of individual ministries, and then a general board that kind of provided, as I understand it, and I'm going to be honest here, the general board predates me in my involvement in anything, so I'm speaking out of what I know historically. But it's my understanding that the general board basically functioned as an opportunity to distribute resources amongst some of those various ministries. What we are doing here is not, providing that kind of a loose connection between our ministries, but we're bringing together all things into a full force, one organization approach. It's something that I've even been preaching here in leadership, here in the offices, that we aren't a collection of ministries, but we are one organization working towards a common mission. And that's different than what the general board did. What the council associations and the executive council did was they brought us some versions of more centralized accounting, and it brought us together in this idea of a leadership team. And the question ends up being, as we've worked through this, is maybe what we're doing here now really is a completion of what that was about. So we kept vestiges in the council associations and in the way we've functioned even financially as really a collection of ministries. So we've had centralized accounting for all those ministries, but we've basically taken everything and allocated it just like they were individual ministries separate from one another. And so we've continued to have some pretty significant silos as a result. What we're doing here is really trying to bring together everything where we're one organization. We're doing one common purpose. We've centralized everything towards more clarified leadership, strengthened the position of leadership in the office of the president, and also at the same time tried to provide even more complete accountability for the ministries through the Board of Overseers. We believe that it's much easier for us to be able to provide real accountability to leadership by a smaller board, that there can be more direct interactions with individuals that are on that board and provide a more complete picture of things. So they would be more engaged even than the council has been. It is much more similar. It is pretty similar to what we've had with some of the executive council, but even the executive council is larger than what the proposal is here. The executive council is 24, and we're talking about a 14 person board of overseers, so that we can seriously focus their responsibilities on accountability. The council associations was charged with a variety of things that this board of overseers is not. There are aspects of the council associations that were charged with communication, and sometimes we've even described it as setting vision for the organization. We believe that the president's position should be the visionary leadership position, and that communication should be the responsibility of the ministries rather than something that is pushed from, it's difficult for communication to be pushed from the grassroots back to the grassroots. It needs to be something that we own in the ministry's offices and take responsibility for. And whenever I say take responsibility, I'm not just talking about us pushing it from us out, but also providing opportunities for feedback. That's just part of the process. So in a nutshell, that's some of the differences there, and I would allow anyone else on the team to say anything about that.
Yeah, only thing I would just add briefly, maybe just a brief outline of the differences there. Again, I'm the same with Danny. The general board predates me, but my understanding there is that board was made up of representatives from different ministries, and then the council of associations made up of representatives from different associations. The board of overseers is not made up of representatives, but is made up of accountability partners who are overseeing and keeping the president and the ministries accountable to the mission. So it's really a different function. Not only are they coming from different places, there's a different function intended. Anyone else want to speak to that question, or we'll move along? Okay, Mike and David asked kind of a similar question. What is the prospective time frame for fully functioning structure? And in the time between when this is adopted and the time the overseers can be selected and organized, how will the structure function? Dustin, you want to take that one? I know we kind of worked on that one together. And unmute yourself first, Dustin.
Oh, thank you, host, for your cooperation and help. Hey, yeah, so it's a great question. I think one, depending on like your leadership style, like time for change can be frustrating, or it could be a protection mechanism. In this context, it's almost like a protection mechanism because the overall time frame is limited. We're limited based off of the existing constitution and bylaws, and so there's a very specific checks and balance that we have to walk through in order to initiate the change. So without being too complicated of an answer, there's multiple pieces of this. There is the leadership, the implementation, the partnership, and then the accountability. So there's four like big things that this change brings, four distinct parts. So some of them get implemented faster. So the leadership and even some of the implementation can begin to be permanent as early as this coming summit, all the way down to the accountability portion, which will take 2 summits. If every vote goes right, it would take 2 summits to be able to fully be implemented. So hypothetically, let's say both of these documents go through the legal structure, which would be the big picture, it'll have to be presented at both this summit and the next summit. And so from there, what happens after it is inaugurated but not consummated, so to speak. And so we have an outline for that. So the easiest way to explain it, I tried to pull it up, but I can't find it. But I think I got it memorized pretty good. Would be to take the 14 people board of overseers. Every person on that board will have a specific function when it's fully consummated. So you would have 6 people that function as like financial overseers or like a financial committee. You have 6 people that will function as a personnel/evaluations committee. And then you will have a chairman and a vice chairman. So every person makes up something. And so the transition to get from this system to that system would be to take the 6 people that basically those pieces, at the time of inauguration, 6-person personnel, 6-person budget committee, the chair and the vice chair, and then they will shift into being the new board of overseers. And that would let's see, it's at 21, 22. That would effectively be like the end of July 2023. So you would have a time period from there to the first regional meetings, most likely in the fall. So there's this gap between July 23 and January 1st, 2024 that has to be connected. And so you would take those existing executive council leaders from that, you would have them basically transition in, but they'll be rotated off as the regional meetings begin to be implemented. So a regional meeting will take place in the fall. You'll have an election, and then January 1st, you'll have people come on. So the longest an existing executive council person would roughly be a year and a half before it's fully implemented. Once it's fully implemented, then the new constitution and bylaws sets the pace for every 2 years. There's election in different regions.
I think that's got it. Does anybody have anything to add?
The short answer to all that is slowly and incrementally. And so
yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not good with slow or non-detailed answer.
And ultimately that what we're talking about here would be a proposal that would be made alongside of this as we complete the process with the council associations would receive their approval and the approval of the General Association.
Okay. Another question here from Glenn. In the Constitution and bylaws of the Board of Overseers and the presentation of the RTF, is the Vice President of Administration and Finance and the Chief Financial Officer the same person? And I guess the short answer there is yes, they are the same person. I think that was just a change in title that was made there to clarify the difference in maybe administration and ministry leaders.
Yeah, I'd even say if there is any confusion, it would be when we created the presentation, a lot of this stuff was beginning to go from theory into application. And the real, how does this work? Like the nuts and bolts of how this works got mapped out as we wrote the legal documents. And so if there's any lack of congruency, it's because of that shift. And as we were writing the legal part, is like, hey, this is way more clarifying to go ahead and shift these titles. So it's really clear. Vice presidents drive ministries, they implement ministries, and the CFO really is a high level financial leader.
Yeah, it's a good catch. It's because I think even it may be still on the website that way and probably printed in the messenger with that vice president for administration and finance. And so we definitely need to make an update to that before we finalize going into the summit. The other thing I would say is that just to note that the CFO essentially functions to maintain day-to-day operations in the absence, like if we had an instance where we had a short-term absence of a president or there was a need, before you install an interim, basically they kept day-to-day going, and that's in the documents. So that is an important decision, but I would also say to you that's also been a kind of a historical function that Linda has performed for us in the past.
David, just jumping in with Josh. Sorry if that's okay.
Yeah, that's right. Go ahead.
Yeah, so trying to map this out in my head, not looking at the document that Josh and Andy and myself drafted out. Several bylaw changes will be put into place and voted on this summit. So technically Summit 21. There'll also be constitutional stuff that'll be discussed in Summit 21 that'll then shift to Summit 2022. And so if everything gets voted on correctly according to the current structure in 2021 GA and 2022 GA, then the new document would be binding then at Summit 22, so July 2022, but the gap is 2022 to 23. So January 1, 2023, we would have the beginning of elected overseers. It would take until 2024 in order to have the existing executive council fully fleshed out into the new operating system. But I misspoke a minute ago. July 2022 is when it could begin, but there's that overlap until January 2023 2024, it's just a machine that runs in a new system.
I text you a new copy of that document, by the way, Dustin, but you got it right.
Yeah, it got buried in my text feed. Sorry.
It was so, the title was so clear. I don't know how you missed it.
For those of you on the YouTube, Josh does not have a very good file structure system, like Untitled Document 91.
That sounds very official to me. I don't know what the problem is.
We all, Craig Rochelle says, high capacity leaders have extreme strengths and extreme weaknesses. It's one of my favorite quotes.
Okay. From Gordon, what are some of the overall benefits and ministry opportunities you foresee with these changes? Vince, you want to take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. I can jump in here. Gordon, I think one of the most exciting things about the shift that we're looking at with the RTF, or what's been proposed, is the opportunities and the number of opportunities. Now, currently, you can be involved at an associational level, and some people are. You can be involved at a national level, or maybe even a C of A level, and less people are as it goes up. What the regional level does for us is just provide more opportunities. With the structure being, and us looking at regional summits and those type of things, there's going to be ministry opportunities there. There are going to be different regional ministries that occur within the regions that are ministry opportunities. So this will actually provide another layer of opportunity for people to either develop further into ministry calls and options for them, maybe more than what they currently are, and more than we currently have right now. So. And I think as far as the benefit, that's the ministry. I just read the rest of the question. As far as the benefit goes, there's just going to be a level. I think it adds a level of communication where things are able to go with having that regional director, that their primary responsibility is to be communicating with those regional leads, those regional ministries, and just constantly pushing information down to where everybody is getting the information. We're all on the same page. And as Danny said a moment ago, we're all able to actually act and function under one mission, one organization as General Baptist going forward. So that would be I think that's the greatest benefit that we have, free up some confusion maybe that's been there in the past.
Anybody want to add to that? Have anything else to say? That's a good question. Hey, Peggy, you asked about a visual outline. I understand that completely. That's how I think as well. If you will go to, correct me if I get the website wrong, Danny, generalbaptist.org, generalbaptist.com.
generalbaptist.com/restructure. I'll put that down in the comments so that people can take that link.
Okay. But if you'll go to that website, there is a very visual layout there that explains the different steps and the different ministries and how they're all connected. Sorry, Mike, I missed your question there. How has there been a proposal for how the regional structure will be laid out? Somebody want to take a regions question?
Yeah, I can jump in unless somebody else just wants to get excited and go for it. So the document that is on the website is a good tool that has both working theory and some just, hey, this is an idea. And the regional piece is one of those, hey, this is just an idea. In the proposal, there is an example of what like a regional breakdown could look like. And it was literally just an example. While we as a RTF team was going through this, we didn't have the data that the headquarters personnel will have to be able to adequately break down into like subdivisions and regions. honestly, that is probably one of the more complicated decisions of this. Is like how do the regions work out? Do they work out geographically? Do they work out? Do they work out where like the groups of people are just like epicenters? It really is. That's a hard conversation. And so at this point, like our suggestion is let's move into this system. And then part of that implementation would be for the president and the headquarters staff to find out what is the best appropriate subdivisions or regions in order to make this happen. I would say another piece of that is really hard to process on the front end is how does the international component work? And really, we know this system has some really good merit to it, but that big piece on the subdivisions is really needing to be data driven, and that's where Danny and the people at headquarters would really be a huge asset.
Yeah, and the conversation around we've wanted to incorporate regional structure in the international context, but the further we've gone down that road, the more difficult those hurdles are. We definitely want to work towards that. We may end up doing something where we bring about the regional structure in the context of the U.S. and then work towards over the next several years, the next cycle of reevaluation of the regions, of how to work out the regional components in the international context. We may, therefore, for a period of time, incorporate some of the international partners into our U.S. Based regions. So that's something we've been wrestling with. That's a conversation that we've had even internally here at in Poplar Bluff, and definitely something we're going to be looking at long term. I think the question, one of the bigger questions that may be coming from what Mike's saying is not just the structure of what individual, how the regions are going to be broken up, but something about more specifically how the structure is going to be laid out. And I would encourage you to look at the stuff related to the restructure document, which I think probably Mike has, that what we're talking about here is regional, not only someone that's over the region. So we talk about a regional coordinator that would be responsible to the vice president for regional ministries, but also champions for other ministries within that region for national missions, global missions, for church revitalization ultimately. And so all of those would be a part of that. Those would have kind of more dotted line responsibilities for working alongside of the vice presidents of global missions, national missions, and church revitalization in Poplar Bluff. But the point is that we want them to be, ultimately, we want the connections to be at the local level so that we can have a local impact in all of the areas of ministry that we can muster. So I think we've hit around those questions. So Mike, do you have anything more specific that you would want to hear information about there?
There are a few details too about how the regional meetings work, as far as the election of overseers and how and what those representatives to a regional meeting would look like within the Board of Overseers Constitution under membership. You can kind of see the kind of details of how those biannual meetings will work.
Good question, Mike. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions?
If we don't get more questions, then getting on to the feed will have taken as long as the conversation surrounding the documents tonight.
Hey, I just want to share with y'all, you know, we had some really specific expected outcomes at the beginning of this. And it came from this season of evaluating like what we're doing. And we were living in this tension of like, you know, is this ministry model really going to be able to take us into the future that we're believing for and expecting as a group of people called General Baptist? And so after that evaluation, like all these things, even now that we're at the very end of this Constitution and bylaw drafting stage, is how can we ensure that we have an empowered leader? How can there be no question on who is the leader? And like that's been part of the problem is the C of A the leader? Is the executive council the visionary leader? Is the executive director? And because it wasn't clear, like stuff would get stuck because nobody really knew who was empowered or who had the authority to lead. So this hopefully, without a doubt, even the language of presidents to vice presidents to overseers, like we all understand that this president, this chief executive, drives that leadership decision, a clear and flexible structure. Some of the stuff that's not fully answered is to give the future generations of General Baptist a game that is a game with definitions, but also enough latitude that you can still play the game for future generations. A great example is baseball has inbounds, out of bounds, but then you can shift anywhere you want into it. It's clear and flexible. Missional accountability. We're trying really hard to drive all this stuff back to mission. So even like a little shift, like the vice president of financial and admin to a CFO position, means all of those vice presidents align with the mission of the organization. And then cultural adaptability, the regional piece really does allow us to continue to not just be, and if we're honest, a lot of times we're really a Midwestern movement, or we're a movement with three epicenters, the Ozarks, Evansville, and the Tennessee River Valley. Like, how can we truly be that international movement that we all believe and want us to be? And so those four things drove every decision. Those four things drove even the writing process of what is a very legal document. And so I just really want to, it's the foundation for us through this process. So I just want to make sure that we all understand, like, hey, this is the real gift of this structure, is these four things that are going to be the things that provide clarity and move us forward into a new day.
Okay, we got a couple other questions. Thank you, Dustin, for those kind of core values we started out with. I think those come to mind when I read even some of the questions we're looking at here. Pastor Logan Hensley, will there be an M&M Summit, or will it move to regional meetings only? No, there will continue to be a yearly M&M Summit, including the General Association meeting, which still plays a very important role in this leadership structure going forward. The regional meetings, which will include, or at least the plan is will allow the leadership then to kind of go with that last, pulled up so I use the right word, that last piece there. Dustin just talked about cultural adaptability. So we're able to go to a region and speak to the needs of that particular region, and not just to the movement as a global movement as it is. So the quick answer is yes, there'll still be an M&M Summit, and there will also be regional summits as well. Dave Kelly asked in the beginning, might the local associations play a role in organizing those regional meetings?
So the problem with doing that explicitly that way is that there's likely to be questions about, there's likely to be regions that are made up where they cut across, different associations. There may be an association that has churches in 2 regions or even 3 regions, based on the way that our associations are made up right now. Some of them are very local, some of them are very regional, and some of them are national. And so I'm sure that we will be leveraging all the leadership possibilities we have out there in terms of organization. Clearly, some of the leaders from within our associations are going to be the ones that are going to be the ones we will rely on for much of the work that we're talking about here, and therefore would be important for working through those regional meetings. Most of what we're going to do in terms of a regional meeting, there's really only one piece of business, and that should be clear, is to elect the board of overseers at that meeting. The rest of the regional summits are going to be for us to be able to pour back into the regions and provide opportunities for them to worship, opportunities for them to be inspired and connect with ministries that are important to them, and then also provide them with opportunities for continuing growth and new ideas. So in a sense, we'll be doing like miniature versions of the summit. There'll be one-day events, of which a ballot and voting on overseers will be a piece. You asked, if I can keep going there, Dave also asked a question about funding those meetings, and we budgeted for funding those meetings going forward. We would budget for doing 3 to 4 of them each year. They would cost significantly less than the summit does because we basically would only be paying for programming and some travel. So it's something that we will include in the denominational budget, and then would probably be offset with some other registration and that kind of thing.
That kind of plays off. I'm not going to skip you, Jim Pratt. I see your question too, but going down to Glenn Jenkins asked a similar question about the financials meetings, and Danny kind of talked about that a little bit. Also, the personnel and this total organization, just the financial side of that. If someone want to speak to that, or we're talking about finances, then we'll come back to Jim's question about global ministries.
I mean, I can respond to that if I need to, unless someone else.
Yeah, I'm always game to talk about money, but I was trying to give some of the other folks a chance to chat.
So, Dustin, you can pitch in here too, but essentially what we've done is that by the reorganizing of certain departments, we're not expecting that we will have full-time staff in all of the pieces that are described here. There will be some folks that will be volunteer, especially some of those regional champions for some of those areas. There will be some folks that will be stipend, and that's we're talking about doing that with the regional coordinator positions until there's a place where it's something might make more sense to move that forward into a more full-time basis. But that's something that would take several years of development and strategic decisions about which ones we would even want to do with that. And then ultimately, we would even have some of our staff of our vice president's positions. We're looking at probably still having, in the short term anyway, flex time with probably 2 of those moving forward. We want the regional ministries VP to be full-time, and then we're looking at likely that the church revitalization vice president, at least in the short term, would be a flex time position. And currently, Vince is functioning as director of national missions and would become vice president for national missions, and he does that on a flex time basis. And it looks like he is at his house right now in the picture, but he's been here all day and then went all the way back to Mountain Home for this. So we've been in leadership team meetings I have tortured them for 3 hours today. So.
For those of you that have been around, like any C of A meeting, executive council meeting, like I'm a pretty vocal financial conservative for the General Baptist movement. It's easy to look at this and see, hey, that's a lot of dollars and meetings and personnel and stuff. I would equate what you're seeing is almost like the code for a video game. And for those of you who maybe, you're not nerdy and that kind of stuff, somewhere there has to be the whole script, like the drafted out, like this is the desired outcome. This is sort of like a long-term model. But then there's a question of like, you don't start there. You don't start on the hardest boss of the game. You start at level 1. And so there really is this flexible way that you can grow and even grow down and decline with this type of organizational model. And so a lot like what Dr. Danny was talking about, that you can start off with some flex time, high capacity vice presidents. At some point, it shifts into like flex time or bivocational coordinators, or these coach positions, these other positions at the regional level. It may even start off as you start to move into it that some of them are doing more than one role. And that's just a way that you can begin to grow. It's a lot like your church staff when it grows. Like I've had a student pastor that was also a creative arts director, and they did that until we grew to the point that now, hey, the finances allow you to birth off and do more things. It really just is, this is the full picture. And then the growth and the finances will be the thing that drives us to the next layer of success, which I think that's really important to process, because when it comes to regions, like a lot of this stuff lives out on the regional level. There's two ways to look at the regions inside of this exact same model. The regional meetings, there's almost a function of it that is a governing function, that one moment where they vote on this overseer board. But the largest piece of the regional model is not a governance model, it's service regions. These regions are really intentional for how do we service, how do we implement the mission, the vision, the resourcing into the local church. And the easiest way to do it is this regional level. So here's an uncomfortable conversation, but like every region may not be equal. You may have to, a phrase I've been saying through this, a very conservative financial phrase, is let the markets dictate what happens. Some regions may have 3 support staff, where some may only have 1. And it really comes down to, like, you're going to have to be intentional with where we put our dollars to get us to the next layers of the video game.
Thank you, Destin. That's, again, my short answer to that question has been, as others have asked me, is that we'll grow into it. And that's essentially what Destin was saying in a much more eloquent way.
I feel like your cliff notes for me. I love it. Like,
well,
my church is going to need you to interpret.
Okay, we got a few more questions here. I don't want to miss Jim here as he slides up the list here, and I put him off. And if someone want to talk about the difference between just the terminology of international and global ministries. It's really just a change in terminology there.
One of the examples that I've given of this is that, and we live, and Vince may want to speak to this maybe even better than I can, but we live in some tension even now about, there are things that take place here in the U.S. that are global kinds of works, right? And I know Jim knows this as well, quite, just the same. But it also is the kind of flipping the model, even to begin to think about how we work with international partners, so that they become mission sending organizations themselves, and that we support that. One of them, I think, a really exciting thing that's happening, and Mark has been working with this about the work that's happening in Japan. If you didn't know, there's now a General Baptist Church in Japan, and that was a thing that's been birthed out of the church in the Philippines, and is being it's a Filipino congregation in Japan. And so what our role there in the organization is, on this side, is really just to help resource them and allow them to really do the oversight. Even they're sending them, they're responsible for accountability with them, and really that shows that we're not just a U.S. thing sending out internationally, but we're a global movement that's sending out globally. And that's a different kind of a model. But it's a twofold answer. And one is, the global world to come here to the U.S., and then also a global community going globally. Vince may want to add to that, because he lives in that tension with some of our partnerships even now.
Yeah, I think that the ability, just in the phrasing difference, allows more collaboration between the ministries, even to where if it's a global ministry, that does include being able to sit down with Mark and current leaders that are working on the international side and go, hey, how can we best sit down together and figure out a plan for what we would consider maybe cross-cultural or multicultural ministries in the States. They just may have a better resource. We're in talks right now of possibly an international coming to the States to plant a church. And so that the collaboration there is so critical. And so just the mindset of moving from, when people say international missions, the first thing we immediately think of is we're sending someplace or going someplace. And the global response is just a phrasing change that says, hey, we're everywhere and we're everywhere together. And so I think, Jim, just to kind of touch on that, like Danny said, and it's just it's a terminology thing, but it's also a mindset thing for us as General Baptists to go, we're not just going to be the people that are sending. We're going to be not only a sending agency, but we're going to be a resource agency. We're going to be a partner with the global community that's trying to build the kingdom of God. So I think just real quick, I want to hit on Jeff's question here, if I can, Josh, on how do you see us finding the quality of leaders we will need without overburdening them in their local ministries? Jeff, it's a great question. And what I think is that in the current system, I think that one of the things we've talked about often at headquarters is that leadership development and how do we find these leaders and where are they coming from? More opportunities in the region gets us more feet on the ground, finding the leaders that we don't know about. I'm sitting here trying to find church planters even now, and there are probably people in this thread that in their region, they know of somebody that could plant a church. And so I've been using this term so often lately, but it's hooks in the water. And we have leaders within our movement that are probably high capacity leaders. They've just not been put in a high capacity situation to see. And so these opportunities, I know our knee-jerk reaction is to only think through our list, but I think this gives us an opportunity to expand our list in an exponential way because of the different layers that we're adding. So.
All right, great questions. And let's move on down here and ask a few questions or look at some of these others from Brother Mark. Can you elaborate a little more on the opportunities that will be available and perhaps explain how General Baptist can have better cultural adaptability?
Yeah, I think let's talk cultural adaptability for a second. So the idea at the very heart is like, how are we able to adapt to two different regional cultures in order to be an effective national and global movement? So let's think about global missions and church planning specifically. So some of us on here have been church planners, been a part of church plants. Unfortunately, depending on what group you're in, what region you're in, some of the churches that you run with, like the expectation of what is a church plant is not always properly defined. We all have one, but like they're not all even the same. And so are we expecting a church plant to have 200-300 people and blow up into something big? Are we okay with 50 people in the storefront? And even those two things are both America-centric views, because what does that look like to plant a church in a mud hut in Central America? And so as we start taking this stuff into cultural regions, it allows them to contextualize, hey, these are the big things that we know we have to do. We know we have to consistently plant churches. We have to mobilize missionaries out of our regions, and we have to revitalize the churches that have already been established. And how you do that really does matter in each one of these regions. So the regional dynamic with a very solid foundation of ministry allows us to take that solid foundation and contextualize it into each one of these regional cultures. Like, that's the huge heart of this regional model.
Yeah, so if we're talking about like church revitalization in, say, Missouri versus church revitalization in California or Oklahoma, those things are probably going to look different. And our churches in those areas are unique in different ways. Some of the stuff, is easily adaptable, and some of it is more dramatic. And so, as we've said, even tonight, we've talked about, I've talked about how difficult it is for us to figure out how to do the regional connections, is because each in an international context, it's because each international field is pretty unique in its own way, not only in terms of language use and travel restrictions and those kinds of things that we have to work past, but also what they think it looks like to gather for church on Sunday, and whether they look at certain practices in one place or another, that whether that means someone's a Christian or not, because we have international fields that would look at some of our we thought of as very conservative churches in the U.S., and they would look at them and say, there's some things that aren't quite right there. I was sitting across the table recently with a pastor from a international context, and I said something about that most of our worship services, where I've gone to church, usually last about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. And he said, all of it? How do you do that? You mean the preaching, right? You mean the worship part? No, all of it. And I was with them that Sunday morning, and there was an hour and a half long sermon and an hour and a half of worship. I mean, so us being able to understand the needs, if we try to go in and put a church in that context and try to run a 1 hour worship service, that's not going to work. And so we've got to make sure that what kind of even coaching we're providing in those kind of contexts is unique to that particular place, which requires us to have people on the ground in those places that can talk across that cultural divide. I know that the worry could be, and I'm just going to speak it, is that whenever people hear the word cultural adaptability, they may think that we're talking about violating our moral code and who we are as General Baptists. That is not what we mean by this. We are not going to begin accepting certain things that we have said are outside of our social principles or doctrine in some way. That's not what we mean by this. Instead, we're talking about more practical matters.
Mark, I didn't answer your question on some of the opportunities. And so the regional piece, and this plays into some of the other questions you guys have asked too. It could be counterintuitive to create more opportunities when it feels like we may have a leadership vacuum. But like the reality is this gives more opportunities for people to be at the table. The current model has some limiters in how we develop leaders. I mean, like the real options are you're either a C of A member, which in the past, the biggest issue there is apathy. Like, what's the point? Does it even matter? Do you even need to be a leader? The executive council, which really is the board of directors of the movement right now, but there's a huge limiting factor if you can only have one per association. So there are times when the best leaders aren't even in the room. And then you have like the headquarters staff. Well, the truth is there's a lot of great leaders in our movement across our associations, across our individual churches. Some of them have time limitations. Some of them have distance limitations. And so as we have regional opportunities, and there would be 4 different coordinators at each region. So it's 28 different leaders on a regional level. And some of those people have very specific passions. Like I can think of a lot of people just out of my network of who could be church revitalizers, who could be church planners, who are extremely passionate about mission mobilization. And now instead of it you have to move to Poplar Bluff, you have to do this full time. Like there's a lot of opportunity to get people into the leadership game quicker. And the more people we have that are bleeding this mission, the better chance we have to be what we all believe and want us to be.
The regions offer us multiple on-ramps for potential leaders and places for people to test themselves as whether they can really do that work or not, and not be in a a top level executive position when they figure it out. So it's one of my favorite things about the system is there's so many opportunities for leadership and leadership development in the experience level, not just in training and those sorts of things.
Yeah, it pulls into Gene's question about leadership development. I think that what this does in terms of a practical side, and I know what Gene's got on his heart to hear some other stuff too. I think, and I agree with as well. But in the practical side, we're developing with some of this regional structure. We're developing almost, you could call it a minor leagues, right? We're providing an opportunity for folks to get some at bats and do some things where we can help them walk through that process. And I think it will expose some places that we have leaders that we, as has already been said, we didn't really know we had, and some opportunities here that we didn't quite know we had, and opportunities to help people to become better and become that kind of a leader, not only in their local place, but also ultimately for the denomination by giving them that opportunity. So I think that in terms of the rest of what Gene's question here is that leadership development, and he talks about LAMP, Bible Institutes, and other programs related and how that would relate. I would tell you right now that those are parts of the strategic plan that we're working through right now. And that was part of what I tortured everybody with today for a few hours, was conversations around strategic plan. And I'm talking about even more formal connections with some of our work we're doing with Bible Institutes and with LAMP and with Oakland City. I've got one of my Oakland City shirts on today. So, but that is, I think that's something that we've got to continue to pursue and push for. Of course, I think most everyone would know this, but I still right now am an employee with Oakland City. I recently found out on Friday they received a $50,000 planning grant for doing research specifically related to this in a collaboration context with General Baptist. And we'll be working towards developing that, what we've been doing with Bible Institutes and the successes we've had with that, for example, in California, which I know Gene is very aware of and been instrumental in helping us leverage that over the last generation. That's something that needs to be developed more broadly, and this will give us an opportunity to explore that and see how it can connect even all the way up through into higher education. And so you're talking about a variety of different opportunities here to do that, and it's clearly a central part of it. In fact, so much so that we've developed two different aspects of leadership development in the strategic planning work that we've done, so that there is leadership development for the local church context and then leadership development for General Baptists, because we believe that both of those are significant and require our attention.
Okay, we've had some great questions and it's allowed us to hit a few different and highlight several pieces of this proposal and the documents we put forth. Does anyone have any specific questions to the documents? That is the Constitution of the Board of Overseers and the Constitution for the General Association.
All right, so I think Glenn has asked the question about Board of Overseers Constitution says president elected by Board of Overseers, and then the bylaws say elected by the delegates of the General Association. I actually think that that's two different ways of saying the word president, and I need to go back and look, and Andy's our in-house checker here, but I think that we're talking about the one that's the Board of Overseers. They elect the corporate officer known as the president, and you may notice that one's with us lowercase p even in the document, because we have to elect a president, a secretary, and a treasurer for the corporation. And we do that basically by virtue of office for the president, and for the treasurer is the financial officer, and then the other person is someone designated by me here or by the president, and then voted through by the board of overseers. But that slate of officers is basically set already. The statements are in the General Association about the president. It continues to be elected into his position by the General Association. So I think that's
correct. Yeah, it has to be done this way legally for the corporate purposes, an annual election, which the Board of Overseers do just for the officers. They are two separate things, but work hand in hand. And if you go back to the C of A documents that we have had before, the same basic wording is in place. Instead of saying the president's going to serve as the president, it'll say the executive director will serve as president of the corporation.
I just want to say thank you, Glenn. It's obvious you've done your homework before tonight. That is very much appreciated. That's what we need.
I would expect nothing less from Glenn. He is a man he's one of the best detailed guys I know. So kudos to you, Glenn.
All right. Do we have any other questions related to the documents or the overall proposal? Vicki, we hadn't got you involved tonight, so whatever the next question is, it's yours. So get ready. And somebody's holding the hard one back. So
thanks a lot. I appreciate that.
How about this one? I'll give one for Vicki to answer. So, what's the role of women's ministries in the new structure?
The role of women's ministries in the new structure, we have been listed prior to this as a basic or support ministry. In the new documents, we will be labeled as an institution ministry, which is a boost for women's ministries. Actually, if you look at the definition of an institutional ministry, it fits more of what women's ministries focus and responsibility is. There have been some concerns that we have been left out possibly of the document. That's all been rectified. We will have a seat, as we have always had, on various committees and any form of leadership in headquarters that will be carried forth. So women's ministries is alive and doing well, and we are thrilled with the new restructure.
And I did torture Vicki today with that leadership team meeting as well. So she was involved in that. Yeah, the definition of an institutional ministry is a ministry that exists to aid, assist, and support the core ministries. And as I've said, women's ministries may do that as well or better than any other institutional ministry we have. That is their missional focus.
Okay, we'll give a minute here or so to allow any other questions to come through. And if we don't have any, then we will move toward wrapping up tonight.
I will say, as we're waiting on questions, Women's Ministries January 1st went to a region plan. We have 7 region directors. We are thrilled with the way it's worked, and I think it's going to be prophetic of what we're going to see in the denomination. We've had new leaders spring up that we were not aware that we had. There's been great dissemination of information, great support system. So I'm excited to see what's going to transpire in the denomination as a result of this region plan.
I think we may have missed a little, maybe a piece of what Jeff Ross said earlier. If I could circle back to that, make sure we don't miss that. But Jeff said something about that finding the right regional overseers will be a major factor in the success of this setup. And then in talking about the quality of the leaders, we talked about that a little bit. But let me just say this, that I think that he's exactly right, that finding the right regional overseers is going to be important. Those need to be high quality leaders who can come in and be able to seriously add value to the organization. I hope, and I think that we will see it in pretty short order, that will become, those overseers positions are going to be things that people are going to want to seek out, because they're going to be able to make a real impact in ways that probably they, as council associations members, they may or may not have been able to feel in the past. So I'd expect that's going to be the case. And then this question about finding the right, people to work, quality of leaders, even this regional structure. I preach this everywhere, that I believe that the greatest crisis we have is a crisis of leadership, and we need to pray that God would send laborers into the field. And I just want to say that that's something that should be a matter of prayer for all of us. And I've preached this, and I think I preached it at Andy's church, that, if you look at where Jesus does that and says that in Matthew, the very next text, very next verse, essentially, is him sending the disciples out. So the people he calls to pray is also the people that he calls to go. And so if I would invite you to just start by praying, and let's just see what God does.
I'm glad you brought that up. I wanted to clarify one thing about that statement that Jeff makes. He said, I also feel that finding the right regional overseers will be a major factor. Again, just clarification. Overseers are not regional overseers. There's regional coordinators who work within regions. There are overseers who oversee the movement as a whole. They specifically oversee the work of the president of General Baptist Ministries. So I'm not sure which way Jeff intended that, whether he meant regional coordinators or he meant overseers, but there's a difference between those two, and I just want to make sure we're clear on that. And you can let us know, Jeff.
Yeah, the overseers are for accountability and their governance, part of the governance structure. Regional coordinators are for ministry and for regional ministry and executing that. So that's something we've heard some misunderstandings. The overseers aren't doing ministry in the sense of providing ministry in a regional context. They're really it's not even, we've talked about the C of A as being representative. While they still technically do, kind of represent, meaning that they're voted into their positions by a region, they're really a representative ultimately of the whole of the denomination instead of a representative just of their region.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions come through. We want to thank everybody for getting on tonight, for all the questions that have come out, and always know we don't have to have this formal setting to answer any questions. All of us are open. You can contact headquarters, contact Danny. His is probably the most available information, but he may send you to one of us to answer any questions, and we're all open to that as well. And so we want to, from the beginning, we wanted this to be a very transparent process. We've done everything we could to make everyone aware of each step we've taken, and we want you to be a part of the process to the very end, to the final vote in July 22, hopefully. So again, thank you for joining us tonight. Danny, you want to close us out with anything? No,
I just want everyone to know that the next step for this is going to be that the constitutions and bylaws of that we've shared with you will be going to the Council of Associations for their endorsement next Monday. So pray for that process and for wisdom as we move forward. And if you're a member of the Council of Associations, I hope that you'll be there and be as involved as you possibly can be in this process, so that we can continue to do more together than we can do alone. So thank you all. God bless y'all.
Thanks, guys.